Roll another blunt. Yeah. Oh, good.
420, doobie, dope, ganja, weed, pot, Mary Jane. The thing on everyone's lips today is marijuana. Politicians, sociologists, healthcare professionals, and the youth of today have all tried to nip the issue in the bud. But we think it's time for the economists say. This video will take you through the highs of legalization, as well as the lows, as we approach a new era of tolerance and appetite for all things marijuana. Our forecast will focus on the United States, where legalization is very much on the political agenda today. California's Proposition 19, also known as the Regulate, Control, and Tax Cannabis Act, was narrowly defeated last year by 47% to 53%. While it remains illegal, 16 states currently approve and regulate marijuana's use as a medicine. Perhaps even more surprising, a Gallup poll from this year reveals that for the first time, the majority of the American population would prefer to end criminalization altogether. Our analysis will focus on 5 key areas: supply and demand, price variations, the impact on government revenues, public health implications, and some surprising conclusions on productivity. But first, we look to the leaders of the free world for a proper introduction.
I inhaled frequently. That was...
The legalization of marijuana is estimated to impact supply more strongly than demand. Looking at the economics of supply first, legalization will drastically lower the cost and risk of production. No more hidden hydroponics, secret stashes, or furtive fertilizers. Consequently, new players would enter the market, leading to an increase in supply. And increased supply would naturally lower prices. Countering this downward movement of the supply curve will be the effect of tax, which will serve both to secure state revenues and to control the volumes of marijuana traded in the market. Taxes should not be allowed to take prices above current, that is to say, pre-legalization levels, as this would render the black market economically viable again. Looking at the economics of demand, it is widely reported that marijuana is both readily available and widely consumed in the US, with some of the Western world's highest per capita consumption. Hence, legalization may only prompt minor changes in the demand curve. Of course, and intuitively, the immediate impact of legalization will be an increase in consumption due to the new equilibrium. However, decriminalization in Portugal and the Netherlands has witnessed a longer-term decrease in consumption. 2 factors drive this. The appeal of the illicit is lost as the illicit is legalized, and improved public health education will drive home the negative effects of marijuana consumption. Over the long run, price elasticity will increase.
Looking at prices across America, there is a clear divide. So what lies behind this division? First, state laws definitely play a part. Marijuana prices in states maintaining high criminalization levels are among the highest. Prosecution efforts in the eastern regions add to the risks and costs of supplying. Conversely, tax laws lead to relaxed prices. Second, supply chain and transportation costs are also critical. Where are the crops? California produces over 40% of all U.S. annual production, while Kentucky and Tennessee produce about 27%. These 3 states supply most all other states, which begs the question, how much does it cost to carry 1 kilo of marijuana from California to New York? For the supplier, each additional mile increases the risk of being caught and creates the need for more sophisticated methods of weed disguise. Higher risk translates to greater price premiums for the users. We predict legalization will prompt 3 major market reactions. First, free crop production will lead to new plantations popping up near local markets. Also, reducing transportation costs and other production and distribution inefficiencies will allow the price of marijuana to fall. Lastly, price differences in the market offer an opportunity for price arbitrage among different states. In the short run, the cost will shrink, and in the long run, the law of one price will prompt a price convergence. Economically speaking, a far more efficient market.
We now focus on the monetary benefits of legalization for the US government. These can be split into two: reduced costs and new revenue streams. First, a reduction in expenses for police resources. The war on drugs is currently the biggest single demand on police resources, but is widely considered to have failed. Redirecting resources to the other key crimes, domestic violence, violent crimes, property crimes, and terrorism, is estimated to have greater likelihood of positive outcomes. Additionally, the government can save substantial costs on prosecution and incarceration. All these reductions total approximately $8.7 billion in estimates by renowned economists Jeffrey Myron and Milton Friedman. Looking at new revenues, the US government will stand to benefit by imposing a two-tier taxation system consisting of sin taxation and standard taxation. The effects of this tax hike will be passed on by the suppliers to the consumers. As pointed out by some studies, the taxation itself could rake in revenues of around $9 billion annually. There is, however, a section of the economist fraternity that believes the demand for marijuana may impact the demand for alcohol and tobacco, thus acting as a substitute, and in such an event, the taxes gained through marijuana may be offset by the lost taxation on alcohol and tobacco. In the words of one consumer,
because I think that in case of recession, because it's so popular, you should try to get some taxi from it.
With respect to crime rates, if marijuana were legalized, you would no longer have to commit a crime to acquire the drug. According to FBI 2010 statistical data, crime has decreased substantially across California, Colorado, and other states with decriminalization laws and a large number of marijuana dispensaries. In 2010 alone, tens of millions of taxpayer dollars were spent on over 1.6 million marijuana-related arrests, triggering a direct impact to GDP. With a serious economic crisis strangling the US economy, does it make sense to continue to flood job markets with unwarranted criminal records? So what about the health effects? At only $20 per user, marijuana healthcare-related costs pale in comparison to alcohol at $165 per user and tobacco at an astonishing $800 per user. A switch in substance use will not only reduce these costs, but some of the 500,000 annual deaths attributable to both alcohol and tobacco. In short, marijuana doesn't kill, unless you choke on the brownie.
our final question is, when the world goes to pot, will the world go to pot? One popular contention is that the short to medium term increase in consumption following legalization will create a weed-addicted generation. This eventuality may harm America's economy as a result of a decrease in labor productivity. Considering the solo growth model, this represents a downward movement on the productivity curve because, for each unit of capital labor intensity, the productivity will decrease. Some critics highlight that America is facing a huge problem. The most addicted countries in the world aren't actually the most admired models of productivity. Is this a race to the bottom? Doing some data analysis and running a linear regression between weed prevalence among 15 to 65-year-olds and GDP per head, we get very interesting results. In Europe and the Americas, the correlation is deeply positive, particularly in the Americas. So, does marijuana add to productivity? Analyzing in further detail the American reality, a regression that correlates marijuana use with GDP per head among all the American states confirms the previous findings. The trend line is positive. No data suggests a causative relationship between marijuana consumption and GDP, but in the meantime, why don't you stick the correlation in your pipe and smoke it?